Guys, I'm here to get into my 9 favorite films by Paul Thomas Anderson, who is my favorite artist of all time to explore complexities and characterization, and perhaps the most inviting way I've ever seen of all the many fantastic directors out there. Characters are generally crooked in depths of intense yearning for connection, and usually there is something of a desire for intense connection going on with a lot of characters. And Paul Thomas Anderson has a completely original visual way of exploring these themes of identity search, bonding, and having ambition, and searching for meaning and depth in such a chaotic world. The camera work always resonates. It's just some of the greatest of all time, and every single film he makes is the long takes just make for such an intense play of voyeurism. And the music display is just always larger than life, and that wonderfully makes for this perfect kind of ultimate balance of perspective between epic scope and intimacy. And feels like P.T. Anderson is just wonderfully evolved, and he falls further into originality upon every decade. And it just stuns me how his many film influences just kind of morph into a tone completely of its own. And it just doesn't even seem like he's nearly anywhere near finished. It feels like he's already solidified himself as my all-time favorite director, and he still just has a lot more in him to go. And it's just it's been a mesmerizing display from start to finish. So I look at this, and I think to rank this as the most difficult filmography of all time, because I'll say for one, this shifts constantly. So this is like the director that counts me the most at being consistent. But I think if I'm just looking purely from the deepest roots of my heart of my favorites, and I would say all of these would make my top 20. Every single one of these would be somewhere in my top 20. So just it takes hyper specific to look at his. So you got Phantom Thread at number 9. That's a mesmerizing display of just challenges of an artist's genius faces along his journey. Daniel Day-Lewis's moments just often seem like he's over the top angry, but yet it all holds up as very innocent as Vicky Krieps perceives him for who he truly is, which just makes for a timeless display. It's perhaps the most visually beautiful and just kind of calming kind of project and tone that Paul Thomas Anderson's ever achieved. It's very original. And then Boogie Nights is number 8. It's one of I think just the greatest hangout depictions I've ever seen, which Paul Thomas Anderson gets his epic scope balance with intimacy and characterization. I think it's one of the greatest depictions I've ever seen, constantly loaded with personality, and there's kind of this perfect balance of light and dark moments happening all throughout. Number 7, I have Punch Drunk Love. I believe that's an ultimate display of loneliness as it transcended Adam Sandler. It makes for an original moment in Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography, as he seems strongly influenced by French New Wave in this one, getting across a very original kind of momentum with role breaking and elements in the storytelling. As Sandler learns to be happy completely with following his heart in this film. It's a very subtly uplifting kind of project, which makes it one of his most layered, and the depths of long takes portrayed in the screenplay. Despite the short time, it's a very layered and fleshed out screenplay. Number 6, I have The Master, which is Paul Thomas Anderson's personal favorite, and this makes for one of the most resonating marks I've ever seen it getting across the bare bones of what any sort of cult is genuinely seeking out of the experience. It just goes to completely understand. And it's such a mesmerizing display, which is some of the most lustful shots of all of P.T. Anderson's filmography. There's just a uniquely calming kind of foundation about this, which is perfectly on balance between intense and soothing. This ultimately makes for just one of the greatest character studies of all time. I mean, just by way of the dynamics between Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix alone. And then at number 5, I'd have Magnolia, and this just simply holds up as a mesmerizing project. This is one that I know P.T. Anderson now feels like he's slightly overdid it with it, but I think I look at it and there's an organic naivete that's perfectly portrayed as influential and inspiring. I think towards what seems like exactly the right note on the most inviting sort of way possible. As P.T. Anderson just has an original intent, a whimsical mystique value towards a lot of dark elements in characterization, which just makes this ultimate statement of dark optimism distinctive to the late 1990s. And it's a film that genuinely surprises me upon every viewing, because it really does seem like it gets better every time. There's just so many layers, so many fresh details, and there's just a hyper extent of energy in the directing, and there's enough momentum to just drive an ultimate understanding of just overwhelming balance of just creativity at raw display. This is one of the greatest most inviting films I've ever seen, it pacing out so many character stories and just the most fulfilling arcs of all time, much like you see in Boogie Nights in a lot of ways. And then you have number 4, There'll Be Blood. And I believe this is just a mesmerizing display. This is my introduction to Paul Thomas Anderson films, and this remains his darkest, most gloomy work, and it's an ultimate kind of thriller angle. I believe it's a perfect character piece at getting across rivalry entirely from a complex, kind of nihilistic perspective by way of Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano. It's just a strongly emotionally charged project, which reminds me of a lot of the influence of Magnolia and how it just keeps getting better and better upon every viewing as fresh details constantly reveal itself. Then number 3, you have Inherent Vice, and I believe that's just P.T. Anderson's ultimate hangout depiction of a hazy culture. I think that's just hyper resonating. Number 2, I got Licorice Pizza, because I'm just obsessed with P.T. Anderson's 2020s art, which turns out to remind me of his art from in the 2000s, from Punch Drunk Love to There'll Be Blood, but combined with his acquired sort of perspectives and fascination with like power dynamics in the 2010s. And this is a particularly groundbreaking film at getting across what feels extremely similar to a retro Linklater kind of momentum in a fashion that's entirely original to P.T. Anderson. And it makes for perhaps the greatest hangout film I've ever seen, with a completely whimsical perspective on a warped depiction. Number one, I have One Battle After Another. This is P.T. Anderson's ultimate statement as an artist, and his greatest film and moment when I think he just really found his ultimate personal way of expressionism by way of his collaboration with Leonardo DiCaprio. The way that he interacts with the characters and the dreamy shots just hold up as some of the greatest I've ever seen. Every frame holds up as mesmerizing, and it's an addicting film to rewatch, and makes for a completely original mark in P.T. Anderson's endlessly mesmerizing art. It really does fulfill a lot about it, many different levels.